Kia ora koutou, Markie here. So this is an important one. Now, I use, as many of you know, I'm a therapist, psychotherapist, hypnotherapist as well. And I use YouTube a lot as a resource. I send people videos to watch in between sessions. And sometimes I find, absolutely brilliant material. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes there's a real gap and I can't find anything that, I think would be helpful for my clients. Not necessarily that the content isn't good, but it might be too academic. So I need something that, that's in kind of, plain English, easily understandable, watchable, something that people can engage with, that explains things in a helpful way. And sometimes I just can't find it. And this is one case where I couldn't find it. So I thought, well, make it myself. So this is a video about the ongoing effects of childhood sexual abuse, of being a victim of childhood sexual abuse. Now, there are plenty of kind of academic videos and things that will talk about the research base and give a very detailed, very very full of facts and figures and statistics and numbers, but they're not that watchable. Or sometimes some of the ones that I watch just aren't very human. That they're so clinical that they're almost seems to take away the seriousness of it and the real human impact of it. So while this may be a broader, maybe broader brushstrokes, a broader view of the symptoms, and I'm not going to go through. I'm not going to give you any statistics or graphs or charts or anything like that, and I might even miss out some of the common symptoms. But I think that I can give something which would be more useful to the people that it's targeted for than some of the stuff that's available elsewhere online. So if you like your facts and figures and your charts and your graphs, this probably isn't the video for you. But if you want something that comes from somebody that's worked with this material, worked with clients that have suffered this childhood sexual abuse for a long time, and gone through people who've experienced a whole range of things, including lots of things that we just couldn't talk about on this channel, then this is the video. This is the video for you. Okay. So a quick caveat, I guess. I'm not sure caveat's the right word, but just to put things in context. It's very important not to compare one form of childhood sexual abuse with another, and make assumptions about that on the basis that one might be worse for the victim stroke survivor than another. Okay, so you could say that penetrative sexual abuse is or sexual abuse that has violence is far worse than non-penetrative sexual abuse that doesn't contain violence, but not necessarily. And it's a very complex thing. And a big factor in this is what's the relationship between the perpetrator and the victim stroke survivor. Because if it's somebody that is in another role, that maybe is a parent and is in many other ways is protective and nurturing, supportive to that child, but also sexually abuses them. There's a whole complexity of issues around that, which we won't go into in this video, but suffice to say, leads to lots of trust issues, and also leads to people denying the severity of minimizing the impact of the sexual abuse because of their divided loyalties, which means people often don't get well. They don't go through the recovery journey as easily, as swiftly as they might. By the way, I've done another video on what recovery from childhood sexual abuse looks like. So when I'm talking about recovery, reference that video. That's my definition of recovery. So so you can't compare, even though one might sound much worse than another. So more subtle forms of childhood sexual abuse, which might not involve touch, for example, might involve just being exposed. I don't want to use the word just really, but which might involve the victim survivor not even being touched, but things being said to them, or they're being exposed to things, or they're being made to watch things. There's a whole bunch of reasons which we won't go into in this video as to why some people can be affected more than others. So never compare. Somebody tells you their what happened with their sexual abuse. Never minimize it, and never say, oh well, that wasn't that bad. Just never say that. Absolutely never say that, because you don't know unless you're inside that person's head how bad that was. So symptoms and effects and ongoing. So often it's lifelong. Doesn't mean though that it has to be. If you get the right help, you can put it back in the past where it belongs. Okay, so but often without help and support, it can be lifelong. It can be a problem for the sufferer, or it can be something that affects the victim stroke survivor in such a way that they kind of feel okay, but other people bear the brunt of their trauma. So some people, the kind of people that always say, oh, I was beaten silly as a child and it never did me any harm. They're people that think that they're perfect. They're often quite narcissistic, but they're assholes and they cause harm to other people. They go around causing misery and distress, and often they're hugely insensitive. So sometimes the distress is something that the individual feels, and sometimes it's something that's almost like kind of passed on to other people. Now, I'm not talking about people who have been sexually abused who go on to sexually abuse others here. But let's talk about that because it's a very controversial one. Let's get it out of the way. Okay, so yes, you are, if you've been sexually abused, or if someone's sexually abused as a child, they're more likely to sexually abuse other people. However, more people who have been sexually abused don't abuse other people than do. Okay, so if you take nothing from this video, take that. So it's never okay to make assumptions that someone who's been sexually abused is going to be an abuser or a threat to other people, unless you've got other reasons to believe that. The fact that they've been abused on their own should never be used as a reason to doubt that person. They've got enough trauma. They've suffered enough. Don't lay that on them, because that's really not fair. And also, there's a difference between children that act out sexually with other children, sometimes in a harmful way, and adults that do that. And a lot of children that have been exposed, and we've done loads of other videos on this, but a lot of children that have been exposed to not necessarily sexual harm or sexual abuse, but sexual material at an early age, acted out with other children, because that's what children do. They act everything out through play. That's how children make sense of the world. And it's only a very tiny percentage of those children that do that go on to harm children sexually as adults. So even if you have a child that's experienced childhood sexual abuse, and you find that they've been doing things with other children, don't make the assumption that oh my God, this child is going to grow up to be a horrific sex offender. It's very unlikely, especially if they get help. Get them help. Never persecute them. So hopefully that one's out of the way, because that's important. So what harm does childhood sexual abuse? I'm not talking about lifelong harm throughout, harm that goes into adulthood, which it does. I'd say, what are the symptoms? I'd say almost everything. It's almost everything, really. It's probably a better way to look at it. It can lead to or cause or exacerbate all kinds of symptoms, including physical symptoms. The link between the mind and the body is huge. Sometimes people actually have long-term physical damage from the sexual abuse. where it's penetrative, which can last into adulthood. But more often it's physical conditions that have an emotional cause. So physical illness. So if we try and break it down, so physical illness is a symptom. Both physical damage from the physical damage of childhood sexual abuse, and physical harm, physical illness, which has an emotional cause. So that's one of the things, and that could be anything. I'm not going to go through all physical conditions. And then of course the old standards, depression, anxiety. They're in the mix. One of the big other areas that childhood sexual abuse affects is trust. We touched on that at the start. So particularly if it's been done by somebody that the child has trusted, or if it's been done in the form of attack. So essentially, it can cause, as well as trust issues, which we touched on before, it can cause post-traumatic stress disorder. So post-traumatic stress disorder has a range of symptoms. So post-traumatic stress disorder is no different, PTSD, it's no different to the disorder that combat veterans have. But people who've been sexually abused in childhood or experienced other abuse in childhood often have PTSD. So PTSD, the main symptoms are flashbacks and nightmares of the event. So a flashback is not like a memory. A flashback is like reliving an event. And they can be kind of very full on, or they can be kind of partial. But somebody will kind of relive the event. So kind of the classic of that is somebody gets triggered during sex, and they're mid-coitus with the partner, and suddenly they'll experience the partner's face changing and it's somebody else there, and they go back into that, which is horrible. It can be treated. Lots of things that can help. If you've got that, don't just suffer in silence. Get help, because it can be treated. Get it treated. So the other symptoms are being very jumpy, and something, a range of symptoms that come under the general banner of disassociation, or dissociation as some people call it, which I disapprove of, because it's kind of American mangling of the language. But don't let me get sidetracked into another video. I'll maybe do that one in another series. Disassociation, depersonalization, derealization, they're all experiences of feeling slightly detached from reality, feeling a bit spacey. Sometimes people it's like a full blown out of body experience. They feel like they've stepped out of their body and they're watching themselves. It can be just feeling very spacey, feeling things around you aren't real. I've had it in the past, and for me, it's like I'm a third party listening to myself talking, which is kind of quite interesting. I get it. I think for me, it's secondary to autistic stuff, which means that sometimes a lot of people with autism have what I call social trauma. So I think it's related to that with me. And there are other symptoms as well. It's a very complex condition. Yeah, definitely childhood sexual abuse can cause that. So also another one that I've done a video with Gwendoline about this, talking about borderline personality disorder. The word almost went out of my head then. Must have been disassociated. Borderline personality disorder. We argued in that video that it should be called childhood abuse disorder, because it's nearly always caused by that. And borderline personality disorder is a lot of issues around trust, rejection, jealousy, all those kinds of things. And people with borderline personality disorder often get a bad press. So that's one of the things that we've talked about. And sometimes people are saying, it's not borderline personality disorder, it's complex PTSD, which is an interesting case, and certainly it's a more humane way of looking at things. So what else? So lots of issues around relationships and sex. So people who've been sexually abused as children can go to either end of the either extreme of the sexual spectrum and actually move from one to the other. There's something called sexual anorexia as well, which I've done another video on, so we won't go into that. But basically, people can become what they call hypersexual, which I prefer to the model of sex addiction. What they used to call nymphomania. Or you could just describe the behaviour and call it promiscuity. So somebody with a history of childhood sexual abuse, sometimes they grow up thinking that their sexuality and their body is the only thing of value that they have. So therefore, that's kind of becomes what they try and present to the world, if you like, and engage with the world on a sexual level, because that's where they feel they have most to offer, and that they're unworthy and worthless in other areas. So sometimes it'd be lots of sexual partners, risky sex, compulsive sex. And then on the other end of the extreme, people can be, the opposite. I don't like the term frigid, but avoidant of sex is probably a better way to put it. It can be sexually aversive, so they don't even like references to sex. So it can be very uncomfortable, and people can swing between those two different states, as we said, which is what we call sexual anorexia. That can have a physical aspect, or physicalized aspect, so that can cause things like vaginismus, which is where is for a woman penetration is very painful, if not impossible, and for a male, erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation. So all kinds of issues of being avoidant, just avoidant of relationships, let alone without that's not before you've got even to first base, not even a sexual relationship, but avoidance of a romantic relationship or the potential for a romantic relationship. And also, sometimes people will end up in sex work, that's or as pornography actors, that kind of thing. So that's a common one. I mean, I guess broadly speaking, men tend to express their. I'm talking very broadly here, so I'm not trying to generalise for everyone, but men will often express their trauma through anger. Women survivors are more likely to end up in sex work, and male survivors are more likely to end up in jail. But there are plenty of women that do end up in jail, and plenty of men that end up in sex work. So it's not black and white, but men often act out more aggressively because it's more acceptable. It's less acceptable generally in society, most societies at least, for men to express vulnerability than it is for them to express anger. Anger is kind of the macho emotion. So a lot of guys will get into crime, they'll get into violence, they'll get into jail. What else? Sexuality. It can cause a lot of confusion around sexuality, and this is often and this is often part of a broader issue of really kind of headfuck, really, which is where somebody who's been sexually abused may have enjoyed part of the abuse on a physical level. They may have hated it, they may have felt horribly violated, they may have felt terrified, it may have been in physical pain, but because our genitals are designed to experience pleasant sensations, that's what that's built into them. When they get touched, even if we're not enjoying the context of the experience, we hate the person, we're terrified, all kinds of traumatic, horrific things are going on, but we can still actually experience a pleasant sensation on a physical level, and this confuses the hell out of people, because they think, well, it must be my fault because I liked it, maybe I invited it, maybe I made it happen. Physical pleasure or pleasant physical sensations is probably a better way to put it, during sexual abuse is not a sign that you were complicit in the sexual abuse, or that you enjoyed it, or that it was okay, or anything like that. It's just a sign that that your bits are in good working order and they're capable of experiencing pleasure. Though in the aftermath of some of these symptoms, sometimes that stops. So sometimes guys think, oh, maybe I must be gay. So obviously sometimes they are gay, but the sexual abuse will have nothing to do with their sexuality, whether they're gay or not. And sometimes guys who are straight will think they're gay or bi because or pansexual because they're confused because they got some arousal during abuse by a man or a male. So that's another big issue, confusion around that. So just trying to think if I've missed any key things out. I usually do miss key things out of my videos, and then I'll put them in the description box below, so do check that. That's where I add in the bits that I've forgotten. I think probably almost any psychological condition is likely to be not necessarily caused but maybe triggered or worsened by childhood sexual abuse. So a lot of psychological issues have a big physical component to them, like for example like schizophrenia or something like that. So I don't know about schizophrenia in particular, but what I'm trying to say here, and I'm talking broad strokes really, is that there are probably very few psychiatric conditions that would not be potentially worsened by having the experience of childhood sexual abuse. Not saying that they cause them, but some things you have a predisposition for, it's in your family, but it doesn't necessarily manifest. So you can have you might have depression in a long history of depression in the family, but it doesn't necessarily manifest. But if basically things happen to you in your life, that's more likely to, and that goes for a lot of things, not just childhood sexual abuse, but childhood sexual abuse is a big part of it. So what's the other thing? So I suppose the other key thing is guilt, really. It's classic that survivors of childhood sexual abuse feel guilty and feel like they were somehow to blame. That ties in a little bit sometimes with the arousal confusion, which I talked about a couple of minutes ago. That can be part of it. Sometimes children will initiate sexual abuse, but usually after sexual abuse has been started by somebody else, and it never makes it okay, because no adult should ever have sex with a child. Regardless of what the child does. The children are not responsible for their actions. If a child has been sexually traumatized and approaches an adult for sex, then there is no justification whatsoever for that adult saying, well, the child asked me for it and they seem to be enjoying it. Sometimes children will initiate sexual activities with their abuser because they feel that they are neglected and abandoned. And they just want attention, or they want love, they want all the things that children should get. So every adult is completely responsible for making sure that children are not responded to in a sexualized way, full stop. So a child is never responsible for their sexual abuse, but it's incredibly common that the victim survivors of childhood sexual abuse feel like on some level they are to blame, and often that's accompanied with a sense of being dirty. So that's another thing. Sometimes people can have a thing about contamination. They kind of always want to maybe excessive bathing, and that might manifest in OCD and things like that. So feeling of being dirty, feeling of being guilty, feeling of being to blame. Then there is the psychological aspect of the abuse, the grooming. So people that sexually abused children will often do a psychological number on them because they don't want the child to disclose to anyone else what's going on. So they will threaten, they will bribe, and they will say things like, if you tell anyone, I will go to prison and you'll go to prison, things like that. And some of these beliefs can actually, some of these things that are said by the abuser can actually be consciously forgotten, but can kind of affect the survivor into adult life. So belief that they're going to get into trouble. I always think I'm going to get into trouble for some reason. I don't know why. That might be because your sexual abuser said to you, you're really bad doing this, and you'll go to jail if you tell anyone. So that's all kinds of kind of beliefs that you can't make sense of can come from this as well. So it's a horrible, horrible thing, it's never okay. It's always harmful, sometimes more so than others. Sometimes there can be a delayed reaction as well. Sometimes people can repress the memory of being sexually abused as a child, and it can come back to them later. It can be triggered later. Sometimes people don't remember their childhood sexual abuse until they have a child of the age that they were when they were abused. So it can be like this ticking time bomb that's there. You think it's all okay, and then bang, it comes back to you. And there's probably more. I mean, I might even do a follow-on video with some of the more. And if you can think of any symptoms or effects that I haven't listed, please put them in the comments. So I hope you got the message, really, that it's bad. It really is. And if you've experienced childhood sexual abuse and you behave in ways that you don't like, or ways that confuse you, you're not to blame for that. Okay, this is what I call a normal response to an abnormal childhood. It's highly likely that you'll have these symptoms, and that your life will be troubled, and you'll end up making bad decisions, and you might, you might end up in trouble, you might end up in jail, might end up not sustaining relationships, and all kinds of life difficulties. Doesn't mean that you're not responsible for your life, because you are, and you're responsible for your recovery. But what this means is, that a lot of these things are almost inevitable that they're going to happen to you. So somebody whose name I can't remember famously said, "It's not a crime to be poor, but it is a crime to remain poor." I'm not sure if I agree with that, but it's not a crime to be damaged by childhood sexual abuse, and it's not a crime to remain damaged by sexual abuse. But the choice is yours. The choice is yours whether you're going to do something about it. Okay. Sadly, often resources aren't there to help people to do this. This is why I support things like Male Survivors Aotearoa, the Male Survivors Taranaki, and that's an organisation I'm actively involved with. But I support all forms of helping survivors. So you're not to blame for what happened to you, but you are responsible for making moves towards getting well. Okay, I don't want to lay this big heavy thing on you, but you have. What I'm trying to say is, it can and does get better with the right kind of help, but only you can make that choice whether to move in that direction towards that help. Whether it's going to an agency, or reading material on it, or seeing a counsellor, whatever it might be. And I strongly implore you to do that. You deserve it. You really do. You didn't deserve what happened to you at all. You deserve to get well. Recovery can be a long, slow process, but the thing about long, slow processes of recovery is, as though it can take you to some difficult places when you connect with emotions. The journey of recovery, it's not like you spend years in counselling and with no benefit, and then at the end of that you suddenly get a benefit. It's like you get benefits along the way, things get better along the way, but it's an up and down path, because things get painful as you connect with feelings. But as you connect with feelings, you heal them and you move on. So please consider getting help. Male Survivors Taranaki, if you're a male and you're in Taranaki, why not start here? But there's plenty of other agencies and other places that get support. Just one other thing, because it's just come into my mind, is that not really a symptom, but an effect is often somebody who discloses sexual abuse in a family will be persecuted and shut down by all the other members of that family. Okay, that is a known phenomena that occurs. You know, it's like with whistleblowers. Sometimes everybody just pounces on the whistleblower. So that's another effect, and you know, can be particularly horrendous and traumatic for survivors. So there will be other things, because there's just so many effects that this has, and there's scope for other videos. I hope you find this helpful. Please, you know, if you think this will be helpful to anyone else, please share it, but in a sensitive way, so they're not triggered. You know, if you're a survivor, I have massive respect for you. And you know, you really do deserve to feel better, and to get help, and if there's anything I can do to support that process, then I will. Check out some of my other videos. I've actually got a playlist for this topic, and I have done videos where I've made book recommendations as well, so check all those out. But keep fighting, keep healing, keep getting help. Thank you for watching. Catch you in the next one. Rangimarie.